Hey everybody, it's Eric Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts.
Hello, good morning, good evening, and good night to villagers all around the world. I'm so thrilled to welcome you to a tactical and practical session on marketing and marketing operations from the one and only Chris Toy, who is CEO and co-founder of MarketerHire, which is a leading talent marketplace used by thousands of companies, including many villagers, and some other companies you might have heard of like Netflix and Lambda School and Plaid and AngelList. So Chris brings over 20 years marketing experience, and he's worked on global brands. He's worked on direct mail. He's worked on every channel right up to Clubhouse. And he is a treasure trove of information. And Chris is also an angel investor for Purple Arch Ventures, which Northwestern University alumni. I just thought it might be helpful to show the range of what MarketerHire and Chris focus on today. Everything from Amazon marketing, brand marketing, CMOs, content marketing, email marketing, growth marketing, paid search, SEO, social media, every facet of marketing. So I think within reason, every marketing question is fair game today. So without further ado, Chris, let's jump in. And you've been on record saying most people jump into testing before identifying their ideal customer profile. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that mistake and then how somebody can really focus on the target demo and the messages?
Yeah, it's something that I think marketing is a fairly straightforward profession, a straightforward business department. You're trying to figure out how to put your product in front of your customers and how to convince them to buy. And so first principles of marketing is knowing who your customer is, and a lot of the time I've worked with or my friends, they will be, somewhere, it could be early stage and honestly pretty far down the line too, when they're still asking themselves, who actually is the customer for this product, which is really, I get it, but certainly not something to be taken lightly, and even worse, a lot of the time, we find out that people or founders are trying to test their way. They think, product market fit, I'm trying to find, the fit. But really, you should have a much cleaner understanding of who your customer demo is and trying to adjust your product for that demo. One, for variable control, early stage companies don't have a lot of budget. You really cannot be running more than like a single digit handful of tests, in a month, maybe, right? Let alone a quarter, if you want, sample size and all that good stuff. So really narrowing that down and having a clear understanding. I mean, your product's already built for the most part. I know we're going to iterate through, but having that customer demo and having a confidence in that customer demo time and time again is a common factor in startups who are succeeding, because it just clears the deck, minimizes variables, and you're really just able to work on product at that point. But if you're trying to split test both market and product, math is not on your side, whether you realize it or not. And also just generally from a strategic standpoint, it's probably just not a good idea. If you don't know who your customer demo is, that's why you might need a marketer on your team earlier than you think, because they can figure that out, or at least figure out a viable audience who can get you started. Got it.
So you're saying and if you're not sure, is the best advice take a hypothesis and then prove or disprove it? Be specific?
Yeah. I'll get even a little more aggressive with it. I think the best path is to try and get even a little stronger than a hypothesis. I think not all hypotheses are the same. A hypothesis can be a loosely held hypothesis, and a hypothesis can be very well informed. When I started MarketerHire, my hypothesis around who our customer demo is and why they would buy our product was very well informed, because I've been in marketing for 20 years, right? I've sold it on the agency side. I've been in-house. I've done consulting. As part of why I was very effective in crafting this is because I've sold marketing in basically every other way you can possibly sell it. And so I create the new product. That's the new thing. I think depending on what you're building, if you really understand the industry and the product you're building, you can have a really strong hypothesis. And you should just know, if you've been in a certain part of tech, or you've been an engineer, or you've been in pet food for 5 years, 10 years, you should know. You shouldn't be guessing. If you are guessing, I think something is missing. So I would take a step back and treat it like an early stage process where do some interviews, do some focus grouping. I mean, if you can get the answers from a handful of people, if you ask, a tight cohort that is representative of who you might go after, and just like really, really fish around it. So I would kind of take a step back, because I think if almost any form of testing, you want it to be kind of this last part of optimization. Like, that's sure, like, test for optimization, but at an early stage, you shouldn't be testing for the strategy. You shouldn't be testing for the tactics, because the math is just not going to be on your side. And I think it's indicative of a larger sort of doubt that you might have, or an incomplete thesis around what you're actually trying to do with this business if you're testing to find out who your customer is, right? Okay. Versus, I know who it is, I know the demo, I know the title they have at this business, and I'm going to kind of find out which of our selling points right at the end is maybe more effective. Like, that's okay, but don't test to find out who the target market is. That's too big a question to test.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So let's say it's a very early stage startup. They've got a product, maybe some technical founders, product founders, things like that. What's the best first marketing addition to the team?
Yeah, leadership. If there's no marketing experience on the team, I would get leadership. So it doesn't have to be in-house, doesn't have to be a bunch of hours, but someone who's been there before. So someone who, whether it's an advisor or someone hourly, or a hire or in-house hire, but someone in that, CMO or marketing manager, director of marketing, growth marketer, whatever you want to call it, but someone who has managed managing a marketing mix and ecosystem before, has done it a few times. So they have the war stories, they have the mistakes, they have experience, and to come and say, hey, take a look at my business and help us begin to put a plan together and put one foot in front of the other. I think one of the biggest things that I see is just this, this sort of general still concept that marketing is a thing to be done later, or is just about customer acquisition, or it's very expensive. But it's not. I mean, it's a thing that if you have any sense that you are trying to grow your business, nowadays, like most talent, you can have marketing in your DNA from day one. And it's going to be much better, because again, I talk to 100 startups a year. People send them to me all the time, and there's a clear delineation between the ones who try to do it themselves, and then for 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, and then by the time they get to me, to say, hey, can Chris, talk to Chris, he'll take a look at what you're doing. There's a huge difference in what they've managed to achieve versus a company that maybe had marketing in their in their team somehow early on. It's just night and day. And the biggest problem is we normally have to go back and rerun all their experiments, because usually the experiments have been done incorrectly.
How do you think about full-time versus contract? And I know that at MarketerHire, you enable people to hire for projects and or contract to hire. So how would you help a founder think that through at the very beginning?
Yeah, I think it's about just, for marketer, we always talk about what is the right amount of the right marketer, but importantly, right now. That's kind of what we look at. So if I at each stage, at each point in time, your needs might be different. Getting the right amount of the right people for really any role, forget marketing, any role of the company is super important and very empowering. So I think early on, in-house hires tend to be more difficult. I will also, it's also harder depending on your connections. I think probably everyone in the Village Global community, at least through Village Global, can get in touch with some great people. But it's harder to hire someone in-house. Great people have a lot of options. It can be hard to get them to join your company and join your mission. You might spend months chasing that person. So I think speed is really important, right? I think that's a common thing for every startup to say, speed's really important. Well, then apply that to your hiring, apply that to your resourcing. Let's call it resourcing, not even hiring. You can hire the right person hourly and just begin to get that intelligence into your business. You can do that right now, MarketerHire or not, you can do that right now. Whereas searching for this unicorn, growth marketer who's going to join your company for the next 5 years, that might take months, if ever. So I would prioritize just being open about the status of the contract in order to get that intelligence into your company as soon as possible.
And you said a frequently asked question that you received is, how do I hire a great growth marketer? What's your answer to that question?
Yeah. We talked about it earlier. I think I think growth is a great term that for me mostly applies to like product and business. I think it's a great role. In marketing, it's a little redundant. I think for the most part, growth marketers, the job looks a lot like a marketing manager or maybe a director of marketing. So, because the growth marketer is often in a lead role for an early stage company. So, I wouldn't look at it as being this new role. It's not really a new role. It's just someone to kind of oversee marketing, look at the data, look full funnel, and identify opportunities, and then be able to develop tactics to attack those opportunities. That's been a job forever in marketing. So I think that's the first thing, is not to kind of think of it as if you're pursuing this new role and this new specialty, and you have to go to all these weird places with people with different backgrounds. It's a normal role. It's a normal job. That's one. And then two, you just want someone, I think it's about experience. I think that's kind of a big thing that I'll say to early stage founders too. You don't want your marketing to be a variable, right? You don't want to say, hey, I've got someone running my marketing who's, used to be an engineer for the last 6 years, and then they just decided to become a growth hacker, and now they run my marketing. There's no reason for that. If I'm building an engineering team, I'm not going to pursue, people with weird backgrounds or have never, worked at a startup before, because I think it needs new energy. It doesn't. It's a job to be done. It's like a plumber. There are good plumbers. I would just hire someone who's done the work, ideally multiple times for multiple companies. Because what's really helpful for an early stage company is you get someone who's made the mistakes, who's seen this work in multiple environments, and then they can apply it to your business and really de-risk you, right? You really want to just have minimal risky variables, because your product is already such a big variable. You just want to have everything else kind of be like a solid 8 out of 10, right? If you're banking on it being just 11 out of 10, it's unrealistic and probably not the right mindset. So I would just look for someone who's done it before, had success and in multiple environments. And then again, just have them come and join your team for whatever engagement you can get. Because early stage, you probably don't need it to be full time. You really don't. You want to have someone come in, set that plan, make sure you're not making any mistakes, and then put one foot in front of the other.
Great. And what makes a great job description or role description as you're hiring your first marketing hires?
Yeah, I was thinking about, we had that question, kind of a couple of days ago, and I was thinking about it, and one, I tweeted it, but one was, make sure that someone who works in marketing has looked at it or even written it. Ideally, we see a lot of startup job descriptions. Again, I'm sure it's in other functions too, but in marketing, where it's very clear that the person who wrote it is not in marketing, or at least doesn't have a lot of experience in marketing. There's just channels in there that don't go together. Very often, you look at a job description and you're like, this doesn't suit anybody. No one exists who has these things in this amount. And that's really important, because if you're trying to attract great talent, no one wants to join a company with a JD. You look at it and you're like, well, doesn't make sense, right? It's indicative of a larger issue. So I would make sure that someone with a lot of marketing experience has looked at it and given you 2 cents. And I would really avoid, scope creep, but apply to job descriptions. Oh, this would be nice. This would be nice. This would be nice. Any additional thing, if you kind of imagine, it being like a filter set on a search, every time you click on it, or click on another variable, the pool gets smaller, right? So really be clear on what you need and stick to the mandatory stuff. Don't throw things in there that would be nice. There's no such thing as would be nice. That's just startups want you to do extra things. If you don't know exactly what you need, then you need to talk to a marketer to help you with that JD. If you do know exactly what you need, don't sneak in other things, because it will just make it unrealistic.
Got it. And then how do you vet people? Do you assign projects? And I know it varies a little bit, but any specific examples there?
Yeah, for us it's a little different, because we have where we have a lot of great marketing talent who work at MarketerHire. Tracy, our director of marketing, I think I saw is actually in attendance here, and she's got a great process. So we're a little different because we're very heavy on marketing. So we do it our way. I think if you're a founder or a team that doesn't have a lot of marketing experience in it, and you're trying to vet, I would lean on someone else. I wouldn't do it yourself. I would stick to it being about culture and work style fit. So ask some open questions. What would you do in this case? How would you approach X? And just see if you get confidence from how they communicate it to you. Because ultimately, a lot of this, and for MarketerHire, we're very confident in our technical vetting, right? We vet for whether or not this person's a good marketer, and has a technical chops. We also try and vet for, are they going to be a good communicator and a good freelancer? But ultimately, until they start working with the company is a variable as well. You might not like working together, or you might not just vibe on a certain kind of communication style. So I would look for that, and then have someone else, have a marketer friend or someone that, Village Global can put you in touch with to vet the marketing side of things. I wouldn't try and vet that yourself. And I certainly wouldn't, sort of impose your own strategies on them or look for them to say what you wanted them to say, unless you are also a marketer. I think I see that a lot. We get a lot of non-marketing founders with very strong opinions about what their marketing interviewee told them about strategy. That's really not gonna. That's never gonna work out. I mean,
Right.
it's just not, right.
Well,
so
yeah.
I would look for that peace of mind. That was really important. Can they convince you of their strategy? Can they give you confidence? Because if you're side-eyeing them, in the interview about like, I don't know if they really give me confidence there, that's going to be the case throughout the working relationship. So you really want to make sure that that's good.
Super. We have a question from Anusha at Liquidly, which is a platform for secondary transactions in private markets. And she says, Chris, what is the marketing muscle you think more appropriate for B2B companies versus B2C? Or is it the same?
Marketing muscle, I'll interpret as like the resourcing, like the talent. It is very different. It's very different. But, and actually my background is B2B as well. I started in B2B and CRM marketing. But it is really different. A couple of things factor in depending on your stage. One is you might have a sales team. And the dynamic between sales and marketing is incredibly important for any B2B company, right? Even if you have one salesperson and a marketing team, that interaction is really important. The interaction between the tech stack is really, really important. The sales tech stack, if you're using, Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever, as your CRM, and then there's a marketing tech stack. So, it becomes much more complicated. B2B is far more intense and far more complicated throughout the entire chain because the teams are different. Sales has an impact. Lead times are much longer. It's less of a direct response conversion funnel. It's much longer term. It's much more complicated, and you have to kind of think about usually a lot about content as well. I mean, a lot of people make the case that in B2C, that content arm is really important as well these days, which is true. But it is mandatory for B2B if you plan to have sensical marketing alongside, usually a stack sales team. And then that marketing team has to think about sales enablement as well. What case studies, et cetera, are we producing to empower sales calls, empower sales relationships? So it just really is, again, like multiples more complicated and in sort of every way, which is not to say it's like any scarier, but you really, really want someone who knows what they're doing for the B2B side, because again, like the interaction between sales and marketing alone is so fundamental that if you don't have experience in building that out, you're going to have an extremely leaky funnel. You're going to have really bad handoffs between sales and marketing, and it's just not going to work out because again, you're usually trying to close a more limited number of clients. You can't afford for a warm lead to drop out because you haven't built out that process enough.
Excellent answer. And as you think about if you were starting again, what would your tech stack for marketing be? And again, that's a broad question, but just some of the most successful tech stacks these days.
Yeah, it is a great question. And funnily enough, that there's a lot of tech being built, MarTech, ad tech to support marketing, but for the most part, for an early stage company, you can get away with tried and true, Google Suite, Google Analytics. If you're B2B, the CRM you choose is really important. Again, whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce or something else. But I would just keep it really, really simple. The enemy of early stage marketing is definitely needless complexity. If you run too many tests, if you have too many places where the data fragments, it's hard enough to have any kind of clean attribution without it being stored in 10 different places. So I'll keep it simple. Don't get distracted by, oh, hey, my friend's startup is launching a new analytics thing. Like 99% chance that is going to be much worse for you than just using Google Analytics and storing most of your data in a spreadsheet. Honestly, the tech stack it changes by vertical. So if you're an e-commerce brand, it's pretty straightforward. You'll use Shopify, Klaviyo, etc. Most industries have a pretty set tech stack. I would just use what everyone else is using. I really would avoid trying to innovate there. It just, again, introduces another variable, and the things that an early stage startup needs are like 1/100th of the feature set that really any product has. So just keep it really simple. The more platforms you use, the deeper the tech stack, your data is going to become untenable. So I would keep it simple and just stick to the basics.
Smart. And let's bring up Jerry Ting of Eversort, because he has a good question for you.
Hey, Jerry.
I loved all your current comments so far. When you think about the strategy of setting marketing for a firm, we're a growth stage firm, so about 110 employees trying to push from early revenue to breakout revenue, right? So B2B SaaS, selling contract analytics to both commercial and enterprise customers. So your point of B2C might not work makes sense, because if you're selling to Microsoft, it's a very different experience than self-serve, right? So but when you think about setting marketing strategy, should we think about it from a leadership perspective, from a brand, from a product marketing, or mostly from a growth perspective? And maybe a blend of both, but what should be the Northern Star for a company of our stage?
As far as so when you say an ideal background for your marketing leadership, is that kind of what you're asking?
No, we already have a marketing leader in place, but when we think about our budgeting and our strategy, right? It's you can do a million things, right? You can do events, you can do SEO, you can do ads, you can do webinars, right? How do you prioritize and how do you think about that when you're B2B enterprise?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and there's not going to be, there's no silver bullet answer to that, but I'll tell you kind of a framework that worked, that I found really helpful. And generally the advice I give is from a lens of de-risking. I'm a pretty good marketer, but what makes me interesting is I've just done it so many times with people and I've seen so much that I generally aim to de-risk, right? I try to provide something that's going to allow you to, again, like keep chugging and never look at your marketing and say, man, we'd be so good, we'd be flying a rocket ship if only our marketing wasn't so bad. Like, that's easy to avoid, actually, right? For us, it's like, the advice I give you is not going to send your ceiling to the moon, because that variable is really your product. So when I look at it, I think a couple of things that is helpful is, one, you have to look at budget, and then two, you have to look at cadence, right? So when you need to achieve something is as important as what you are trying to achieve. To me, it's actually more important than what you're trying to achieve. If it's a goal that you're trying to get to by the end of the year or in 12 months, totally different list of strategies than if you're trying to reach it, by the end of the quarter, if you're trying to reach it by a fundraise this summer. So that's something that I always see kind of get skipped or not really thought about as much when I hear other people's goal setting, is they're not being diligent about setting that time aspect as well. So I think that's one, is saying, okay, what are we trying to achieve and by when, right? And then depending on that answer, budgeting and tactics becomes a lot cleaner, because a lot of these many tactics are unrealistic to mature. SEO, for example, right? It is unrealistic to say, well, we don't really do much of SEO right now, but I have a fundraise coming up at the end of the summer, and I know that all these investors are going to ask about organic traffic. So let's make sure that organic is now 50% of our acquisition by the end of the summer. It's like 0% chance, not going to happen, right? It's like not actually possible. So you want to kind of tie those things together, and then if you have the leadership, I think that's how you provide them the goals. You say, hey, look, here's what we need to achieve, and by when. Now tell me what budget you might need and which tactics you want to be able to execute against. I think that's a really, really important thing. And again, Tracy's who's our marketing leader, we have that conversation all the time, and we choose to have some tactics which we're not planning to be, incredibly meaningful for 12 to 18 months. And we're okay with that. And then we carve out a certain percentage of the budget to go to that. And then the rest we carve out looking at quarterly goals. And, there's no perfect answer, but that's an answer that we're comfortable with and we run with.
Super. Thank you. And thank you, Jerry. And let's bring up Yvonne.
Thank you, Chris, for your advice. Advices. I have a question. I'm really curious. Have you had the chance to see the special marketing specialists who from offshore, so not from US, who's good on US market, just to understand if it makes sense to hire someone outside of US because it's cheaper, or it's like mandatory to find a specialist in the United States? If you're targeting
it's a good question. And it kind of goes, the answer's both ways too, whether an American marketer can market in another country. I think it's simpler than you might think. So from a from a technical marketing perspective, understanding how Facebook works, how to build our campaigns, understanding the technical aspects of SEO, understanding what goes into brand, all those things are completely fine to pull someone international who may not understand the local market. Where it becomes a variable is where you might think language and cultural understanding. And so depending on what your product is, that can be better or worse, right? Because depending on what you're selling, if it's maybe a pure SaaS, very engineering heavy technical solution that hey, as long as you speak the language of engineers and back end whatever, it'll be fine. Like, okay, that's totally fine. If it's a product that's, let's just make again for argument's sake, because it could be B2B as well. For argument's sake, it's a B2C product. I'd probably begin to get a little more uneasy about it, and it's more about the creative. So it's not about how good a marketer they are. It's about whether or not the advertising creative, the messaging, all those things are going to be as good as they could be. And so that just depends on language. So if they have no experience in the US, if their language is not perfect, and you expect them to drive the creative, whether it's email copy or advertising or landing pages or whatever it is, I would be worried about it, because you're probably going to be worried about it. And what's going to happen, I promise you, is that let's just say you run 3 months of tests and the tests are okay. What I look for, like I said, is you don't want to run a bunch of tests and spend a bunch of money and take a bunch of time and then make excuses. That's kind of the worst thing you can do as a startup. And so I promise you that if you run a bunch of tests, and chances are the test results will be like, okay, right? I mean, they're not going to just suddenly be a rocket ship. It's unlikely. They're not going to be totally garbage. That's unlikely. It's like somewhere in the middle that they're okay. If you're not sure about their language skills, you're going to wonder about it again. And you're going to make excuses again and say, well, maybe it would have worked if we had someone. And then you're screwed. You just wasted 3 to 4 months because you're going to question it. So I would get someone, as long as they have, really strong language skills and a command of sort of the US market, even if they don't have the experience in it, I think that's fine. Or if your product is so technical that it's not about culture, then that's fine. But if it is a product that needs someone who understands the market and messaging, I probably would avoid it, because it's going to put down in your mind, and that's the last thing that you need.
Got it. Thank you. One more question, just to clarify. Like in case of our startup, we provide online notary service, and it's pretty legal. It's legal domain, and it's also like it's require a lot of knowledge about the legal forms, etc. And I'm curious, like how important for marketer to understand the domain, the details of the market deep that you can generate good ideas for.
Yeah. So I think it's one is you could get someone who has experience. I think that's helpful, right? Oh, I want a marketer who's really understands notary legal language. Again, that's probably going to be a minuscule talent pool, if it even exists, where you can access it, right? That's a very small group. Pretty unlikely that you're going to find someone there. You honestly don't need it. I've consulted for 200 startups. I do not have domain expertise in 200 industries, right? You just learn it, right? The same thing for, when you started, I don't know, if are you a legal notary? Right. So if you're not a legal notary and you own the company, right, then you can't have that be a problem for your team too, right? Because it's not a problem for you, right? I mean, you're here, and no one said, hey, Ivan's going to be terrible because he doesn't know, notary legal language, right? So same thing there. You expect a professional to learn it, to understand it, for you to help them understand it, help them understand what the product differentiation is. It's a product question. And if you go to a large company, the product team has to brief the marketing team, right? So if you're at Apple, Intel, whatever it is, it's a largest company, there's a huge process of briefing the marketing team to say, we have this new product coming out, here's where it's different, here's why it's going to win. And then a marketing team has to process that, and then they have to agree and then go to market with the message. So you just do the same thing here. You and the marketer have to sit down, work on it, and then you together feel comfortable with the company's approach when you go to market. It's unrealistic, again, to kind of say, hey, I want someone who understands legal notary language and also is a great marketer. I mean, just it's not necessary, and it's going to hurt your ability to find someone.
Got it. Thank you a lot.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And Chris, we have a question from Jerry. For marketing ops, there are so many metrics that you can track nowadays. What are the top 3 that a startup should track?
Okay, so I'll try and answer it a couple of ways because obviously that's there's not really like a single metric there. I think sort of generally, if you keep it first, I'm a marketing traditionalist. I started in direct mail and telemarketing, and then saw digital. Was there for the whole run of digital kind of emerging, and didn't really see any difference. There's just new channels, technical tools, but basically it was the same methodologies as I was doing, with direct mail and offline strategies. So the same thing here. You kind of want to have a sensical funnel, right? So you need to have like a top of funnel and then a lower funnel, and say, okay, I understand my customers when and their stages and what we're calling them as they move through that funnel. So at the top, for example, like prospects. Then maybe again I'll call it warm leads. That's maybe more of a B2B term, but there are equivalents with B2C. And then qualify to buy customers, and then repeat customers. Kind of work your way down. So if you kind of stretch it out and just say, look, do I have a good sense of the customer journey and that funnel from the very first time that they hear about us, however that is, all the way down to buying, all the way down to churn/repeat buying. If I have that laid out, and I know what that looks like for our product, then you just put a measurement on that all the way through, and then you monitor that, right? And you monitor that, and then you begin to look at it and have hypotheses about which parts of that funnel you want to attack, right? And that's where like growth and kind of as a concept came out. But again, that's just like regular work, right? You just look at it and say, okay, well,
yep,
there's a good reason why people are dropping out here, so let's leave that alone. But they're dropping out over here for what we consider a bad reason. That we believe we can actually affect because we have the right talent or resources or whatever it is to affect this reason. So let's go attack that. Like that's that's all you need to do, right? And so top 3 metrics. It's not really a top 3 metrics because you'll get the boring ones. That's like new customers and retained customers. Like sure, whatever, right? You can have those, but it's really about that whole funnel and that whole journey. If you are in command of that funnel, you measure it, and you religiously attack it, you'll be as good as you can be. It doesn't guarantee success, but it does guarantee that you're not going to be making silly mistakes.
Super. Well, let's bring up Indra. Hi, Indra.
Hi, Anne. Chris, everyone.
Hey, Indra.
Yeah. So, in a brief intro of myself, Indra, the co-founder of Sources. We're a live virtual project-based high school. Yeah, Chris, we met briefly one time. But
I know you already.
Yeah. So reimagining high school education, all that to be better. So I had a question about just hiring. So my question is like, how should you think about hiring for marketing/growth and scaling from a seed stage to Series A stage company? So once you've identified the target customer demographic, you've run your initial, you should have your overlay, like the various channels that you're pretty sure that you want to scale. Like, just how should you think about hiring, when you have like those team members and then you're like, great, we're fundraising, we're scaling, and now what next?
I know we'll kind of move pretty quick, but quickly, is there a specific like kink that you kind of found right now? Like, is there something that's not clicking the way, or a specific question?
Yeah, well, I guess this is more from my personal experience of running and scaling a fast growing company. But like, how should you think about like, I guess I'm just looking for potential sort of potholes to avoid, or things to keep in mind, like as thinking about hiring. Great, my few team members.
Ask yourself
scale.
Yeah, kind of ask yourself 2 questions. One is there someone on your team or in your advisory group who you can ask the question that you just asked me? Right. So that's one, right? So because if there isn't, right, then you either need the marketing leader internally or you need the marketing leader externally who you can lean on to ask this question. Because, this question is a question that, myself and Tracy, we ask ourselves this once a week, right? On our one-on-one that we have, we ask this question of ourselves. Hey, is this right? Is the team right? What else do we need? What do we think we need in 3 months? Blah, blah, blah. It is a forever problem. So if you don't have that, because your marketing is going to change. The market's going to change in how it reacts to you. Suddenly, Apple blocks 1 million cookies, right? Like, this is the job. It is an ongoing process. It is closer to a scientific process than it is, anything else. And so, you want to make sure you have someone internally or externally that you can rely on to help you answer this question very, very frequently. And then two, broader and more actionable, I guess, as well, is if you do believe that you have a good sense, every company now can have a rounded marketing mix basically at launch. Okay, it doesn't mean that everything's like crazy scale and huge budgets, but you can be you want to be in a multi-channel marketing mix, with a number of strategies and tactics out there, just to create some data that is not biased, is not, cornered into one tactic where in 6 months you're like, oh, that one tactic maybe didn't work as well, and now we have data or nothing else. So you want to have a rounded marketing mix. So that's kind of the two things that I would always ask, yourself is, one, do I have someone who I trust to be able to ask sort of marketing leadership questions, again, on a weekly basis? And if not, fix that. And then two, do I feel like I have a rounded marketing mix? And if you don't know how to answer that, then you go back to one, you need a marketing leader you can lean on. And two, if you do have an answer to that, you're like, oh yeah, I know that I need to be in 5 channels, but I'm only in 3 because budget, because whatever. I wouldn't allow yourself to have any excuse. If you've gotten the feedback that you should/can be in, let's call it 5 channels, you need to figure out how to get yourself in 5 channels. You should not sort of just truncate it, because that marketing mix takes time to gel, takes time to create sensical data, and you need to give marketing that time. So I would either you know what you need, in which case invest in it, or you don't know what you need, in which case invest in making sure that you do know what you need. And like I said, it's not a one-time question. This is a question that's a once a week question, let alone once a month question for even an early stage startup.
Super. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
And Chris, how should a startup think about marketing budget?
Yeah, I guess one a lot. So I think if, you can think in round numbers, and you want to think of it as an investment. And then you also want to think about time, kind of like I said to one of the earlier questions. So generally, if I frequently get asked by an early stage startup who maybe is like getting into their first marketing motions, or is like kind of kick the tires, and they're like, I don't know what a budget is. Like what should it be, right? There's no like should, because it's an all in how you run your business. But if you take an early stage company, you're generally talking about minimums, and you're generally talking about like what's the minimum amount of time to get sensical data. And so, generally speaking, on the lowest end, I call that between like $15,000 to $20,000 spent over a couple of months. So ideally, if you do $15,000 to $20,000 a month, all in, that's team, that's advertising spend, that's graphic design, that's your total marketing budget, $15,000 to $20,000 a month over 3 months. And you need that time because campaigns need time to bake, you need time to adjust, you need to be able to run different experiments. If you can do that over 3 months, like I'm pretty confident that you're going to have a data set that has both true positives and true negatives in it, right? That's really what you want. If you run like $5,000 a month for 3 months, there's a really good chance that you don't have true positive or true negative data, because you probably spread it too thin. You haven't really done anything with any real vigor. You just kind of wasted some time and have some anecdotal stuff that you probably could have found out from just like talking to someone. So you really want enough money there to put oomph on the data set, and enough time there to put oomph on the data set. So 15 to 20K all in, and people, graphic design, advertising budget, all in for 3 months. Usually, I'm pretty confident that gets you there. Again, you can do less. It's just less rolls of the dice. And so, much higher chance that you end up with nothing, which is, to me, always the worst possible thing, is to have wasted time and money because you didn't attack it with enough vigor.
Great. And then just in the last 2 minutes, can you tell us, how do you work with companies? So a company can call you, right, and basically say, look, I need help. And you and your team will help match them with the right talent. Can you talk a little bit more about how that process works?
Yeah. So we deliberately have, what we call a concierge front end, and then the product is, technology and data driven in the back end. The matching is done algorithmically, the rates are set algorithmically. So we kind of have this like merging of two marketplace styles. There's the Airbnb concept where we have thousands of marketers, they set their own rate. We have a ton of data on them. We have an algorithm that fuels matches. But the front end, we really want to be a very clean concierge, do it for you experience. So, I was personally very tired of, and I think just as a general thesis around marketplace products, I don't want to browse Netflix for, 10 hours, right? I don't want to browse Uber Eats and every restaurant has 4 stars. I don't know what that means anymore, right? I also don't trust their recommendation algorithms because it says, hey, you love an Adam Sandler movie because I happen to like pause on the Adam Sandler movie one time. Like that's not good enough either. And so I think, our thing was from day one was we think that everyone just wants it done for them if you can actually do it to the bar that makes them happy, right? And so, that's why on the front end, it's kind of the Uber-y marketplace experience where, they just get you a driver that as long as they know where they're going, the car's clean and like they don't try to do anything weird with me, I'm pretty happy, right? And so same thing for our marketers. We believe we can nail it in one. So we do a 30-minute intake call. That's where actually a lot of the questions I was asked today, we get asked that all the time on these intake calls. And that's why we do a call, because in a wizard, all that doubt, all that I'm not sure what I need, I don't know how to set a budget, all of that stuff in like a self-serve wizard, there's not really a great opportunity for that to allow itself to bake and then get confidence. So we do it on a call, and all of our account managers and sales team are trained on marketing operations to be able to answer all the questions I answered today. A lot of that goes into it. And then we help you get there to say, okay, well, now I realized I thought I needed a growth marketer, but I actually need a CMO and a brand marketer. And I actually didn't think I had budget for a whole team, but I do have budget for an email marketer. You get to all of that stuff. Then the sales team kicks it over to the product team. They send it all, through our tech product. The match comes back. It's one match per role. And we say, great, we have the perfect person for you. It's Sarah. Here's her background. Here's why she's a great fit for you. She's in budget because we know your budget. If she looks good on paper, get on a 30-minute phone call with her to meet. And then if it's 2 thumbs up, because the marketer is interviewing you as much as you're interviewing the marketer, then, with a marketplace, job starts right away. We handle contracts, billing, et cetera, et cetera. So, whether it's HP, Chanel, Netflix, Fortune 500, unicorn, down to early stage, and, we have thousands of all of them, the product experience is the same. And generally it's about 48 to 72 hours to get your match back. And normally the hire is made in about 7 days, which is, pretty great to answer a pretty painful question.
Thank you again, Chris, for your time and your expertise. And I'm sure you'll hear from a lot of us soon. Thank you again.
Great. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at villageglobal.vc.